ICQ Podcast episode 442, Weekend Projects. Hello and welcome fellow amateur radio enthusiasts to this, our 442nd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode we join Martin M1MRB, Dan KB6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is Weekend Projects. Well, as always, we thank our subscription donors who provide us a wonderful base to pay our way and really show their value they find in their ICQ podcast, and they do that in a very simple way. They go to icqpodcast.com/donate. They select a monetary figure that reflects the value they got from the show and either set up a one-off or a subscription donation and then send it our way to help us continue our work. We would ask you to do the same, and as I say, visit that very important webpage, icqpodcast.com/donate, as I say, and show your value for the ICQ podcast. Right, well now we're going to join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including a Dream Rig contest and AI radio presenter last 1 week. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 442 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you as always, Dan. And your side of the pond, we have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hey, Martin, it's great to be back.
Yeah, it's good. And you realise, Caryn, I haven't got your call sign wrong for a long time now. You know I'm going to do it later by accident, do you?
Well, I think what's going to happen is I have to apply to the FCC and get a different call sign, and then you can work with that one.
Oh, you're trying to confuse me. Hi. Okay. In the UK with me, Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. And just to warn you, I'll be down to see you at the weekend. Hi. And moving the other side of the pond, not the other side of the pond, but the other side of the channel from me, over there in Germany, I have Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Good afternoon to those in the US, good evening to those in Europe, and good night to the rest of you.
Yeah. And
Clocks, guys.
yeah, we were talking earlier about different working people at different parts of the world. And it does sort of seem strange sometimes that you're talking to somebody in the morning and it's their night time. It is funny at times, isn't it, Ed?
Yeah, as I just said, at the moment it's very confusing because, of course, people are changing clocks a few weeks different. So adds to the fun.
Yeah, but we should be on UTC, so we're okay. Okay, start our first news story. I quite like this. Dream Rig contest is underway, and it's the 5th annual Dream Rig contest of what they have to do is write an essay. You've got to be a youngster. You write an essay on amateur radio. I'm going to go with Caryn first on this one. Caryn, what do you think?
I think it's fabulous. I think every year they run this. It's a way to get kids to communicate with other kids because peer influence is so important at a young age. I wish this were global. That's the thing. We've always talked about the fact that it seems easier sometimes here in the United States, where this contest is based. It seems a whole lot easier to get kids involved. There's so much going on for kids. It would be wonderful if one day kids could compete, write about amateur radio and what it means to them, and give ideas on how to get kids more involved in it, which is one of the topics they have to cover in the essay. I sure would love to see this go global. There's tremendous appeal for amateur radio and the young imagination. And I think if they want to improve this, they should certainly think about some way to take it outside of the hemisphere and really spread it around the world. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's nice to see it back. And honestly, I can't wait to see what the kids have to say. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on this. It would be great if it went international. Unfortunately, for those taking part, they would, percentage-wise, have less of a chance of winning. But I think it should be sort of maybe winners in each country. And I think, like you say, it's interesting to hear what the youngsters have to say about us. Dan, I think you know about this one. I think ARDC were involved early on, were they not?
So let me just mention a little bit about going international. Maybe one thing they could do is do this by IARU region. That way you have 3 contests. Anyway, so I learned of this contest when I was working for ARDC. One year we gave the Intrepid DX group a grant to buy the radios. And I actually posted 3 of the top 3 winners for that year, which was 2021, quite a while ago now, on the ARDC website. So if anyone wants to see those essays, they can go to the ARDC website and search for it. I also asked where you could see the current winners, and folks there at Intrepid said they post the winners and the winning essays to their Facebook group. So if you all want to see the winners from previous years, just go to their Facebook group, and I would bet those will make the show notes.
They certainly are, Dan. I noticed you added them in, and that's good links for people to be able to check out on this stuff. But yeah, I think it's a great way of promoting our hobby, and it allows youngsters who maybe can't compete technically or operating wise, but they still bring in something good to the hobby. Edmund, what do you think?
Well, I saw the word contest and I immediately looked the other way, but then I read it again and realised that it was an essay writing contest that fortunately I'm unable to enter for a whole host of reasons, including, amongst other things, age and the fact that I don't live in an eligible country. But I'd be very interested to read the entries from this, and especially what the youngsters write in response to the last part of the question: how can amateur radio be made more attractive to people their age? Would I be correct in assuming, Dan, that there are different questions each year, so I couldn't, for example, look at answers to that question from previous years, for example?
Well, as I recall, it was a very similar question, so I'm not actually sure.
Oh, okay, because if I was trying to write an essay, I honestly don't know where I would even start with that question. Back to you, Martin.
Well, I hope you wouldn't use AI to do it for you. Hi. That's another one of my pet hates at the moment. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, just echoing what everybody else has said, Intrepid DX Group is a foundation that sponsors DXpeditions, among other things, and hence it should be international looking. And it would be really great if this, as I was going to suggest the same thing as Dan did, split it into the IARU region, so you only have to run 3 groups, 3 contests, essay contests. And my understanding is, yes, the aim of this is indeed to get information back. What do the youth of today think could be done to make the hobby more attractive for them? And I think that's been the theme every time for was it 5 years it's been running? So yeah, if you look at the 2021 essays, the ARDC website, Edmund, you should be able to read what was said then. And if they do post these to anywhere apart from behind a firewall at a certain not to be named social media area, maybe somebody else will post them out onto a real website, but I'm not sure about what the right to do that would be anyway. In any case, it would be good. It would be nice to compare what 2021 said and what 2024 said, and see if the response has changed because some of the things from 2021 have been implemented. Would be an interesting review to see what's happening. Good luck to the Intrepid DX group on this. It's a great idea. They are sponsoring it themselves now, so they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. So good on them, and let's hope that they may be able to find finance from some sponsors to be able to expand to be worldwide next time. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, this is great. And I think from all of us, it's a great way of finding out what the youth want from our hobby or understand. And it's a great way for them to put some input back in to help us, along with the fact that there's a good chance to win some really nice rigs as part of the prizes. So that's a good one. Right, moving to our next news story. I take no apologies for this, Dan. I stole it straight from your blog. Hurricane Helene has changed my outlook on emergency communications, you wrote on your blog, Dan. And I'm going to get you go first, because I think with global warming and things like that, that places that were very unlikely to suffer some of these disasters probably could going forward. So over to you, Dan.
Well, certainly no apologies necessary. In fact, I'm honored that you thought it was worth doing this on the podcast. So the thrust of this post is that I actually have changed my view on emergency communications. I live here in Michigan, and Michigan is rated one of the lowest as far as severe weather conditions, meaning, we don't get hurricanes here. We don't get, we get a few tornadoes once in a while, but even that's not very bad here in Michigan. So we don't really have the need for as much emergency communications capability as, say, Florida or Oklahoma. But even so, I'm coming around to the idea that maybe every ham should think about adding the capability of communicating in an emergency, just because, because you never know. One thing that happened here in Michigan, for example, a couple of years ago, a dam broke, and certainly all those people that were affected by that needed some kind of communications. And so, if the hams there, and I don't know that they did or not, but if the hams there had some kind of capability of operating offline, off the grid, then they could have gotten the word out and gotten some communications out. So what I'm advocating now is that every ham should think about adding that kind of capability to their stations. And just as an example, I kind of have that capability here. I don't know how good it really is, but I have a solar panel, and I would be able to charge my 9 amp hour lithium-ion phosphate battery and operate using that for a good amount of time, especially in the summer. And I'm thinking, well, maybe what I need to do is to add a larger battery so that I can operate my home station, not just my little KX3 that I use for POTA, off battery. So, in case I need it, I have that capability. Yeah, and that's basically it. I refer to the post that Tom K4SWL made in light of the events in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, where he lives, and that's it. That's the story here. Is think about what you might be able to do as far as emergency communications goes, and give yourself that capability.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. And early part of the summer, I purchased a 100 amp hour LiPo battery to take out portable with me. The other piece of kit I bought, which it sounds sensible, but probably very much useful in the situations you're talking about. My battery charger can charge the battery at 20 amps. None of this 4 amps and wait 24 hours for it fully charged. So a 20 amp charger, if you lose the power for a couple of hours, it comes back on for a couple of hours and whatever. Possibly a high power battery charger might be of use as well to people in those environments. Just a thought. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, okay, just a couple of points on here. In the amateur radio hobby, we have a lot of people that are interested in the likes of SOTA, HEMA, POTA, castles on the air, etc., etc. So portable operating. So those people already have an off-the-grid radio station. Yes, it might not be high-powered. Yes, the antennas may be limited, but it's something. However, and that could be useful for getting information between serviced organisations, so between the fire brigade and the hospital or the shelter where people are staying because the houses have been flooded, etc. I think there's a bigger need here that information is so important in these emergencies. Yes, people need water and people need food, but they also need to know what's going on. And I really wonder, and I posted this as a reply to Dan's blog, and apparently somebody's come back and said it's already being done, which is good news. If you had amateur radio enthusiasts that also, in addition to their amateur radio station, were licensed through the service organisations perhaps, and obviously through the FCC, to be able to run a low-power FM station for their local community and be able to then put out announcements to the public from the authorities, official announcements about what's going to happen, what's going on, where to go to, and this kind of information. Information in these situations is almost as important as food and water. So maybe that's somewhere where volunteers, whether they be radio amateurs, we have the skills, or be they scout troops, whatever. If something, that kind of network could be set up, I think it would be very valuable to the local, at the local community level, and it do nothing but bring a good image of amateur radio as well to the public. And as Tom K4SWL did, he actually put the word out that because he had solar power, he had satellite internet access, etc., he actually invited anybody who wanted to come round, charge up their phones, send some emails out to the family to say that, hey, we're okay, we've got no power at home, but we're alive and we're okay, everything's going to be fine. That kind of service to a community there is no value you can put on it. It's so important. And I think if the amateur radio clubs and the amateur radio individuals in these kinds of areas could become the local information hub, I think that would be a great service to the local community. And radio amateurs have the skills to do this. Not everybody has. Back to you, Martin.
We certainly do have the skills, and what you said is quite right. Edmund, we live in the UK with global warming happening. Yeah, we've had the odd tornado and bits and pieces. I wonder if we can get more of them. Maybe you and I will become much more useful to the community because we're amateurs. What do you think?
Well, perhaps just because traditionally we don't have things like tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and the rest here in the UK, that doesn't prove or guarantee that we couldn't have one tomorrow. And we're recording this on the evening of Wednesday, the 30th of October, and about an hour before we started recording, I turned the TV on and saw some extraordinary pictures from the Valencia region in the east of Spain, where some towns in that region have had a year's worth of rain in the space of 8 hours, and there was one town where they had less than 30 minutes warning that anything was coming, and the phrase global warming was bandied about quite a few times in the news report. So I get the impression that a lot of people think that global warming has at least something to do with it. So, yeah, I think Dan is very wise. In terms of batteries and LiFePO4, lithium iron phosphate, it's worth buying a larger capacity battery because the cost has dropped in the last couple of years in real terms. For example, a few years back, if you went on to eBay, and I know there are other websites available, but eBay's the one that I use and tend to keep an eye on. 3-4 years ago, if you wanted to buy a 12 volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery on there, you would be looking at probably £250 at the very least, and possibly a lot more than that depending on what brand you bought. In the last year or so, I've seen them on sale for £200, and in some cases, you know, with the Black Friday deals or the like, a couple of tens of pounds less than that. I think I saw one on there for 175 at one stage. So the prices are coming down little by little with each passing year. So yes, Dan, I would certainly encourage you to invest in a slightly higher capacity one than the one that you've got at the moment. In terms of low power localized broadcasting, I'm not sure Ofcom would go for that in the UK, which would actually be a bit of a pity because unlike most other European countries, the UK does not routinely have FM broadcasts down the very bottom of the band between 87.5 and 87.9. 87.7 has become the de facto restricted service license frequency for low power 28-day maximum temporary radio stations that cover special events or run as trials for potential future services. So occasionally you will get one of those, but for the most part, in most places in the UK, most of the time there is nothing between 87.5 and 87.9. So if Ofcom would allow it, it would be really easy to have like a publicity campaign in the UK that says, in the event of a major disaster, get your FM radio out and tune down to the bottom of the band. And if one of these stations was on the air, that would be where you would find it. So my gut feeling is Ofcom wouldn't allow it, which would be a double pity because, as I say, in the UK we're probably better placed in terms of having a free, quiet chunk of the FM broadcast band where everybody could go and it would be easy to find a station like that. Great community initiative. I'm not sure I would be entirely happy with inviting random people to come round my house where I had power, people who, for all I know, could be anybody and who might have, shall we say, less than honourable motives. So I think a bit of caution would be required. But if you had a household with lots of people in it who could keep an eye on everybody who was turning up on the doorstep, then that might be a slightly different proposition to if you lived on your own. And last but not least, if you've got a handheld, make sure the battery's charged up periodically. Check even more often if your handheld is elderly, because the battery that will also be elderly could suddenly die with no warning, and then when you turn your handheld on and need it to work, that's when you discover that your battery has expired. And even in times where there aren't disasters, just tune up and down the 2 meter band in particular, because although you'll have a national calling frequency, for example 145-500 in the UK, and most of Europe as well for that matter, you may find that locally there are other frequencies that have been informally agreed upon where people tend to hang out, if you know what I mean. So it's worth listening to see where people are. So if the day did come that you needed to call for help on the national simplex calling frequency, if you didn't raise anybody there, you would then know what other frequencies to try instead, and maybe you would have more luck contacting somebody. And one final thing, some handhelds, if you have a battery connected, there's a very small quiescent current that will drain the battery. I have radios from Wushan and Yaesu and ICOM, I think, that do that, whereas the cheap and cheerful and humble Baofeng UV5R, you can have a battery connected to that for years, and when the radio is switched off, it doesn't drain it. So those are my thoughts, Martin. Sorry for the rather long speech there. Back to you.
No, they're all interesting points, Edmund, and you choose your equipment right and all those sort of things. Caryn, I know this is more of a US story, and the guys in Europe have literally hijacked it, but your part of the world suffer much from hurricanes and national disasters?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I think everybody is making some excellent points here. This is a very, very important discussion that we're having. I should say, on a personal note, the historic Superstorm Sandy, more than 10 years ago, is actually what rekindled my childhood interest in becoming a ham. I realized I was cut off. I could not communicate. And so after Superstorm Sandy, I got myself in gear to study and become a ham. And that was that same year. It's the same year, same year that I said enough of this being in the dark and being cold. And so in my case, I know even though I do have the LiPo batteries for my CODA outings, what I have here at home, what I had installed within probably a few months, as soon as the market would allow, I had a standby generator put in to power the entire house. So we've got juice running in the house when there's an outage for a little bit shy of 2 weeks. So we have that and 2 large propane tanks that fuel it, since we do not have gas service in this part of Suffolk County, New York. It's so important to be able to do this. I did not get involved in emergency communication. I got distracted by so much else. Goodness knows amateur radio has a lot of distractions in it, but I would most certainly be committed to being at the ready if my services were needed. And I'm delighted that I would have power at the house to be able to run everything. I've got my handhelds. I've got my HF. I've got VHF, UHF. So I could do whatever was needed. And I think it's important to think of that, as you say, guys, in light of global warming. The stuff we're experiencing is not going to go away. So very happy that we can talk about this. And Dan, thank you for writing about it. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Caryn, on that one. So I think we're all agreed. Great news story you had on your website, Dan, your blog. And it was worth discussing, because I'm sure the things we've discussed will maybe turn on light bulbs in certain people's heads and make them think more. So if it saves somebody because they're more prepared, that was a great move.
Well, that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Right, move to our next news story. Tunisian ham camp for youngsters gets a grant, SAYAM grant. Now, I went to Tunisia about 20 odd years ago, as I was telling the boys, and it surprised me how long ago it was. But when I was out there, I kind of asked and was told, you're only allowed to operate from a club. They don't issue personal licenses. So it looks like things have changed quite significantly on this one, and it does sound very, very interesting. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, Tunisia has actually been in the news, in amateur radio news, over the last couple of weeks for a couple of points. The first thing was there was a high-speed Morse test taking place there, which a young Romanian ham won. breaking the world record for the speed of receiving call signs. I think it was somewhere around 200 words per minute. And he broke the other world record that he actually had made the previous year. So that was in Tunisia. Now we're seeing that there's going to be a regional Youngsters on the Air camp in Tunisia, presumably for the African countries, North Africa at least, and sponsored by or controlled by the National Radio Society there, and run by them, the Association of Tunisian Radio Amateurs, and the Yasme Foundation have actually very kindly made a grant to cover their costs for this. And yeah, it's great. It looks like amateur radio is taken off quite well in Tunisia, and also with the youth element there. Nothing but positives from this story, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, I quite liked it because it was a part of the world where I hadn't thought there was much amateur radio going on, and it's youngsters. So, you know, we are living in interesting times. Things are moving forward. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
A couple of thoughts, Martin. First, I did do a little bit of a check while we were discussing this, and it looks like Tunisia has had individual amateur radio licenses since 2018. They made a change to the system and now allowing people to have individual licenses and operate from their homes. So that was a giant step forward. What was particularly great about this event this time around in Tunisia is that more youngsters were able to come from nearby countries, and it was combined with scouting, which I believe this was the first year, if I'm not mistaken, this may well have been the first year that the scouting organization took part in this. And that to me says, well, you know, scouting is a great resource for amateur radio, and a lot of people get plugged into becoming a ham through their scouting activities. So this is another way to grow the participation in ham radio through young people. Now, the next step, of course, would be have these kids get involved in that essay contest. We go back to that. Wouldn't it be great to have this part of the world, the young people who were first turned on to ham radio through an event like this, talk to other young people through a nicely written essay about why it means so much to them. So, as you say, it's all good news. It's all good news, and certainly with these individual licenses available to people in Tunisia, kids can get right on board, study, take the test, and succeed, get on the air, and it's all systems go. Back to you.
Yeah, it's a brilliant thought on that one. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think that Africa is maybe a really untapped source of good things for ham radio, and I kind of wish our societies, our national societies, would do more to promote ham radio in Africa. And so just the news of this happening is really good news. I don't know how else to go about it, but I would like to see us do more in Africa as far as promoting ham radio.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's a lovely country. I know it was about 20 years ago I went there. It was a really nice country. Apart from when you got caught in the markets and you really need a chaperone when you go to the markets because being a tourist, they won't leave you alone. But Mrs. B and I went on a tour of the country. We had a coach tour as well as staying. And there are pictures of Mrs. B riding a camel in the Sahara Desert. We touched on the very edge of the Sahara Desert. And Carol's terrified of heights. And they actually managed to get her on a camel and get the camel to stand up. She looked very worried at the time, though. But hey, that's what I remember most about it. Edmund, have we left you anything to say about what's happening in Africa with the youngsters?
Not really, and I spoke rather a lot on the last news story, so I think I'll pass on this one if that's all right, Martin.
No problems, no problems. Well, so give you the opportunity, and I think it was a good one. Right, move to our next news story. AI presenter experiment pulled on a Polish radio station after 1 week. Caryn, I'm going to let you go first on this one. I was quite surprised that we're now pretty much stuck with AI, and it starts to worry me a little bit, but over to you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Well, second to my disgust with space junk is my disgust with the misuse of AI. I don't toss it in the garbage entirely, and I think some of it is downright brilliant, but unfortunately, like most things, it is not always used, let's just say, to our benefit, and as a substitute for intelligence, creativity, and humanity. I don't think it's a good thing. Again, not a blanket condemnation, but it's not one of my favorite things. There was supposed to be a 3-month experiment at a Polish radio station. The 3-month experiment was to have an AI DJ. The listeners hated it so much that the radio station was besieged with petitions and phone calls. My guess is maybe they threw a few eggs. Who knows? Whatever they did, they made it clear that this was not something they enjoyed and it had to go. In fact, the petitioners asked that the regulator and those folks involved in media ethics get involved and shut this down. So the very wise folks in charge of Radio Krakow said, "Okay, we're done." After a week, they were done. There were three AI voices that they had put on the air. Now, I have to say, it didn't fly in Poland, but it's here in the United States. There are some DJs in the West Coast. I think one is in syndication. So United States radio does have DJs that are AI, and to me, it seems really sort of a legacy of what the original thing, which would have been automated radio, which I remember working for a radio station many years ago. They ran a live AM station and an automated FM station, which was basically reel to reel tape. Remember that? Reel to reel. But I think what's happening now is it's proliferating. And it's really it appears to be human, but it's not. They find ways to program local references into the AI character in each market. Makes it sound like it's a hometown DJ when it isn't. It's brilliant. Okay, yes, it's brilliant. The human mind has amazing capacity, but again, is this what people want, and should this be done? For that matter, how do we know 5 years from now, 4 years from now, 3 years from now, you call QRZ and somebody comes back to you on the air and it's a ham radio operator who's really AI? That's not their call sign, that's who they are. It's a little scary. Back to you, Martin.
Well, I think it's more than scary as well. And I'm not a Luddite and saying, oh, these new technologies shouldn't happen. But to me, if AI is going to make things so perfect, we're going to do away with more people's jobs being done away with machines. You're going to have a computer telling you what's going on. The other thing is, if you were to do an AI search, and let's say you did an AI search on my name, I'm not the only Martin Butler in the world. So that AI search could come back with all sorts of things, tell you I'm a convicted killer on death row in the States. That ain't going to be true, but it could get it totally wrong. And I think there's still serious room for worry on some of this stuff, even though I know it's coming. But we'll have to see. Edmund, you've been in broadcast. I know you did some hospital radio and that. Surely you wouldn't want a computer put you out of a job?
Well, I was only a volunteer, so I wasn't paid or anything like that. But virtually all the broadcasting I did live, which meant that sometimes things could go wrong. It also meant that if when I was speaking something popped into my head, a memory or a piece of information, I could mention it live without it being pre-scripted. So there was spontaneity, there was the fun of things not going exactly to plan. And I mean, I haven't listened to any recordings of me from 20 years ago for a long time. I've got some cassettes upstairs somewhere, not on 1/4-inch reel-to-reel tape, just on, standard cassettes. But I'm pretty sure that as good as AI is, I'm not computer literate enough anyway to know how to get it to do it, but if I did know how to do it, if I tried to get AI to replicate that, even if it did a good job of impersonating my voice and it learnt sort of the turns of phrase that I say sometimes and voice inflections and all of that, as good an impression as I'm sure it would do, it just wouldn't be the same somehow. So I'm not entirely surprised to hear about this trial being pulled. You can never absolutely replicate the real thing. You can do a really, really, really good impersonation, but it's never going to be exactly quite the same. Do we know, out of interest, if listeners were pre-warned that the presenters were AI? And if they were, is that why there were complaints? Or is it a case that the listeners weren't warned, but they somehow picked up on it, that it wasn't quite 100% authentic somehow, and they then contacted the radio station to ask the question and complain about it? Do we know which of those applied?
I don't. I picked this up off of the Radio World magazine, so I don't know. But what you're saying, Eben, is very correct. Is if you've got AI and a computer spouting away, if it misinterprets something, you could have it say something completely wrong or completely rude. And how you gonna cover yourself back from that one? That's an interesting one, Edmund.
And it doesn't have memories either. I mean, I used to do a late night Sunday evening short 45-minute program where we played sort of easy listening and laid back music, and one of the artists that I played rather a lot, possibly more than I should have done, was Norah Jones, because I really liked her first couple of albums. So her first album came out in, I think it was 2003. Well, I stopped doing hospital radio in 2011 for various reasons, so I'm pretty sure that, say, in 2010, I would have played one of her songs on the air at least once, and when I was announcing it, or back announcing it, I might have said that was Norah Jones performing Come Away With Me, or whichever song it was that I'd played, and then I might have just said, oh, that album is 8 years old now. Where has the time gone? Isn't that amazing? A little throwaway comment like that. But as good as AI gets, I don't think AI would be able to do that, because it wouldn't have the memory or the lived experience of the album coming out all those years ago and the passage of time since. So little things like that, I just don't think AI will ever be able to do a good job of replicating.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to put across is it hasn't got a personality. Hi, hi. Oh, Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
So just for kicks, I put Martin M1MRB into an AI search engine, and it came back and said, Martin Butler, known by his call sign M1MRB, is a prominent figure in the amateur radio community. So there you go. Yeah, I think that it's just like everything, right? There's no denying the technology. That's just the way it is. So we got to learn to live with it and hopefully use it properly, and not like just rail against it, right? I mean, if you'd mentioned the Luddites, no matter what they did, it was not going to stop the march of technology. And no matter what we do now in AI, it's not going to stop its adoption just because there's so many things you can do with it. And, some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, but let's just hope there's more good than bad.
Yeah, well, two things, Dan. You put my call sign in, which got to me and nobody else. And interesting what it said. Whether I believe it or not is another matter. But yeah, that's what it said. Number two is it's going to put people out of work. How many presenters, disc jockeys, if we can get towards very, very clever film, maybe we won't have the need for actors anymore. Maybe we just put a script into a AI system and it creates us the film.
Yeah, I mean, all that's certainly possible. All that's certainly possible. And, as far as ham radio goes, I think that probably you could actually do something like that now, right? You could have, I think somebody might actually have already done this, is figure out a way to make a AI operate in a contest. Right? Like, especially like a digital modes contest or even a CW contest. And just see what kind of scores they could rack up.
Yeah.
I mean, all this stuff is really, I mean, we think, oh no, that could never happen. But of course it will happen.
It certainly will, Dan, and things have moved on. And I know I sound a bit of a Luddite, but I worry about this one.
Well, I'm with you. Okay, I kind of worry about it too, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to stop it. Ed, you said that computers are already talking to each other in amateur radio with FT8, didn't you?
Not just FT8. Lots of different digital modes can operate on their own, even back to RTTY and such like through the scripts and all the rest of it. But the point I'd like to make here is, of course, that everybody refers to AI as a new technology. That isn't correct. AI, artificial intelligence, is a blanket description of many, many, many different technologies. You have voice recognition as part of it. You have virtual reality as part of it. You have big data models as part of it. The term AI has been released by whoever in the industry or in the press maybe a couple of years ago to mean the march of technology, as you were saying. It's really encompassing a lot of different things that we already had or that are now being developed. As we get more and more powerful computers, more and more things are possible. The part of AI that a lot of people worry about, and you've all commented on, is if the technology that's put together, if that computer emulates a DJ or a news commentator or whatever, or writes a book or a section in a newspaper, is that correct? Well, the other way to look at that is that memory that we said, that Edmund said AI doesn't have a memory or doesn't have memories. No, it doesn't. It steals those from the internet. And I use my word perhaps incorrectly, steals, but let's just say it goes and collects them from the internet and builds up what it needs. It means that it can put things together. It might even be able to find a recording of Edmund back from all those years ago that somebody actually put up on the internet and use and reshape that. Who knows? But the other very interesting statement that I've read in the press, and as far as I know it's actually correct, is that 3 of the major IT data storage companies, should we say, so you can guess who they are, have actually started to put pressure on the governments around the world to bring back nuclear power stations in the countries where they've gone. For example, in Germany, we have no more nuclear power stations. The only way to get enough power to run the computers to support AI when it finally goes in is that the amount of electricity has to be drastically upscaled. And the only way to do that, you can't do it with solar, you can't do it with wind, you can't even do it with coal-fired power stations. The only option is to go back to nuclear power. So that's as much a worry as AI itself, in my opinion, considering that one of the stories of why Chernobyl exploded was because they were trying to increase the power out of that to be able to increase the power of the woodpecker system, the RF woodpecker system. And, we need more power, run the generator harder, and then a mistake is made. So, yeah, it's not a pretty picture, but I just want to make the point that really AI doesn't have any respect for people's intellectual property, because it just takes information from the large data stores and uses it willy-nilly. Unless there's some controls put around that, it's not a good thing. If there are controls put around it, who controls the controls? It's a problem for everybody, whether they're in IT, whether they're likely to lose their job selling vegetables down in the market or whatever. It is the move of progress coming. And as we've said before, you can't stop progress. So we can all hate all of the technologies or some of the technologies that are now under the blanket term artificial intelligence, but we probably stand no chance of stopping them. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, good points. And I think everybody's brought good points up on this particular one. But and I know it wasn't an amateur radio initially story, but it could very well move into our hobby, as the guys have said. And I think it was worth knowing about. Right, move to our next news story. And I say the guys who like long episodes are going to be happy with this one. We move to our next news story. A Boeing-built satellite exploded in orbit a while ago. And, all right, it wasn't a brand new satellite. It was one that's been up there since 2016. So it's been up 8 years. Caryn, do you want to go first on this one again?
Sure, Martin. This is obviously not a good year for Boeing. Everyone pretty much knows that the Starliner is what left the 2 astronauts effectively stranded, for lack of a better word, on the ISS. It was not considered safe for them to return to Earth. And we've all heard about commercial aircraft built by Boeing having, shall we say, mishaps dealing with the way the planes were constructed, pieces not quite staying on. So this satellite, late this month, blew up. It exploded, sending more than 80 fragments, maybe close to, I would think close to 100 fragments flying. Here we go, space junk. And of course, the big concern for a lot of people, both for the U.S. Space Force and Roscosmos, is what is going to happen when these fragments hit other satellites. So far, nothing, but the year is young. with regard to that in terms of whether something hits something. Eventually, there will be some kind of impact, I suspect. They haven't identified the cause for the explosion, but the delay to its launch back in 2016 was because of a problem with its thrusters. And I believe that, in fact, is one of the issues that was plaguing the Starliner this year. So, does this affect amateur radio? Well, not directly, but this particular satellite is the type that uses radio broadcast, that sends radio broadcast signals and internet, telephone. So there's that to think about. Yeah, not a great year for Boeing. It'll be interesting to see if other satellites can avoid the flying debris as the weeks go forward. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, certainly on that one. That's an interesting one. And yeah, we cover a lot on space junk. And yeah, it's just a continual problem I think we're going to have to put up with for the rest of our lives, unfortunately. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
I think the link was through that Boeing satellite to him.
It might very well have been.
yeah. Except I didn't have, I had muted myself. I think the problem here is that Boeing has become other than the engineering emphasis company that it once was. You know, they put in the CEO that's been more of a business guy, and his job was to really increase profits, and so he, did what he did to do that, which of course, Boeing being a technology company, that doesn't work with a technology company. If it had been a retailer like Bed Bath & Beyond or something like that, maybe what his strategy would have worked. But, Boeing being a technology company, you need to be more sensitive to the engineering kind of things that, like testing to make sure your door latches don't let go when you're in midair, and all these other things. So anyway, like Caryn says, this has been a bad year for Boeing, and I can only hope that these things will send Boeing off in a more, I don't know what you want to say, more technology-emphasized direction.
Yeah. Well, as I say, Boeing, it's a shame when they're in that situation where...
And it's really a shame because Boeing, I just learned this myself, Boeing is actually the largest exporter in the United States in terms of dollars. So all this stuff is really hurting the United States.
Certainly is, Dan. Certainly is. Right. Edmund, you got thoughts on this one?
Well, it's a rather unusual circumstance because this satellite had been located at 33 degrees east for a number of years, and I'm just trying to think why it would have suddenly exploded. I've heard of satellites exploding when they barely have got off the launch pad. I've heard of them being detonated because they malfunction part of the way up. I've heard of them being put into graveyard orbits if they malfunction slightly once they're up there and in service, but I just don't know what would have caused this. Fortunately, 33 East isn't a main direct-to-home broadcast location, so it won't have caused problems in the way that it would do if one of the Astra satellites at 28 degrees east that carry Sky TV, for example, if one of those exploded, it would be quite disruptive. But I gather this particular satellite was being used probably for TV outside broadcast feeds or telephone calls or data links of some description. So yeah, very, very, very strange, Martin. Beyond that, I don't really know what to make of it. Back to you.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously they carry fuel on board and they can sort of fire the jets just to change the orbit or put them back into the right place. And maybe one of those failed. that's where I would have thought it's probably happened. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, on the discussion about what caused it to explode, the possibility, of course, is it got hit by some space junk and damaged the tanks on the thrusters, etc. So it may be that, you know, before we accuse Boeing of bad design, that satellite may have been hit by something else up there. There's so much junk up there. I wonder how many of you remember Early Bird. Early Bird was up in orbit in 1965 as one of the very first TV and telephone satellites. It was built by Intelsat, which is the owner of this satellite that's just exploded. If you go to the Intelsat website, you'll see they are developing and building their own satellites the whole time. They've got more experience than anybody else in the world. I'm surprised to see that this satellite was built by Boeing at all. I could see Boeing launching it, but Intelsat are a company that usually build their own satellites. So, you know, we don't really have enough information on this as to why it exploded. So, it would be interesting if in the future something else came up about it, and we could actually pass that information on to the listeners as to why this actually exploded. It could be when they tried to fire the thruster to put it into a different orbit or correct the orbit into where they should be. As I say, it could, they're probably fairly far out there. It would be a geostationary satellite, so there's less junk that far out, but it's always possible that something hit it, whether from another satellite up there that's destroyed, or even a small meteorite or something from outer space. It would be good to know why this went wrong before we just look at the name Boeing and say, another failure for Boeing. But hopefully we'll get some clarity on this in the following weeks. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, as I say, let's see what happens, and I don't want to labour too much on space junk because we have done quite a lot over a number of episodes, so that's great. Okay, again, I'm going to give this one to Caryn because she gave it to us at the last minute. Great story, Caryn. Hams in Brazil are going to honour a pioneer in wireless wireless voice. Caryn, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Martin. Yes. Well, we all know about special event stations and ceremonies honoring people like Marconi, the wireless pioneers. And of course, we know as well, and we've given some coverage to a wonderful special event that occurs every year based out of India, which is a Jagadish Chandra Bose is honored by amateur radio operator running a special event honoring him for being the what they call the father of wireless for India. That's a Data VU2DSI. And so as this station in India is starting to get rolling, we hear about something fabulous going on in Brazil throughout the entire month of November. This is the call sign, listen for Papa Radio 5 Lima Mike, PR5LM. The L and the M represent, I'm probably going to mess his name up. I'm sorry, my Portuguese is non-existent. It's Padre Landel de Moura. He was an ordained Catholic priest and an inventor. Most of these wireless pioneers that we've heard about who are honored by special events were involved in telegraphy. And what's interesting about this priest is that his experimentation was with telephony. He was fascinated with the concept of transmitting the human voice. And He held quite a number of patents, including he got a U.S. patent in 1904 while he was in New York City. And he patented a wave transmitter. It used a form of modulation which people know today as amplitude modulation. So the special event station will be on all modes, and they're going to also be making use of satellite. It's nice that we honor our history always. I mean, we honor even non-amateur history with special event stations, but I think something like this we hear so little about. This is while he's not an unsung hero because he is celebrated widely in Brazil, and National Amateur Radio Day, which is held in Brazil on November 5th, honors his work. And it's just great to be able to hear about him and to add another page in our history book for those of us who are still learning about different countries and their contributions to the development of wireless. So again, just be listening for PR5LM, and you can go to QRZ.com and read a little more about him. This was total news to me, and I think it's fantastic. Martin, back to you.
Yeah, I agree with you because as us in the Northern Hemisphere, we don't often hear much happening from Brazil. Brazil's a huge country, and a lot of these pioneers are great. And as you say, history, I was never interested in history at school, let's be brutally honest. You know, did I care that Henry VIII had 6 wives? Not a jot. But when there's something that's a bit more personal to you or a bit more to the hobby we do, yeah, I get quite excited about this stuff now. So a great one you found for us, Caryn. Now, I'm going to give this to Edmund. You like doing special event stations. You're going to try and work this one, Edmund?
Well, the number of contacts I've ever had with Brazil you can count on one hand, but from memory they've tended to be on 15 metres, 21 megahertz, and my 40 metre dipole will tune up quite nicely on that band as a 3.5 wavelengths antenna, and actually works a lot better than you might think it would. So I'm not holding out any hope, but I will try, yes.
Well, that'll be a good one. That'll be a good one, won't it? So Ed, chances of working this station from Germany?
Yeah, certainly. I've worked into Brazil a few times this year, actually, on 20 and also 10 metres, I think. I haven't managed 15 yet, so I'll have to see if I can match Edmund with that one. But yeah, it's possible. Apart from that, I can't add anything to what Caryn has said. Obviously, a very important guy that we basically don't hear a lot about. And great that somebody in Brazil, or this group down in Brazil, are doing something about it to try and at least publicise within the amateur radio fraternity the good work that he did. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, they certainly are, and that is good news that we're publicising the people that proved it all worked on the shortwave bands when we were starting out in radio and getting us the HF privileges we've got today. Right, that's the end of our news stories. Let's find out what the guy's been up to. And as always, I always offer the ladies to go first, don't I, Caryn? So what have you been up to since the last time I spoke?
Oh, it's been busy, but not crazy busy. I've been doing some POTA now that the weather is cooler. And so I've been out every weekend, and 10 meters. No news to anybody listening to this podcast. 10 meters has been on fire. So I've been enjoying getting my DX. It's like going fishing and reeling them in. It's been fun. So I've been enjoying that. I participated in a special event honoring Elmers. I love that, being able to get on the air and honor the people who helped me and have QSOs with people who were honoring those who helped them. Unfortunately, conditions were not the best during that time, and I didn't get on and make as many contacts as I wanted to, but as they say, the intention is half of it, I suppose. Maybe next year we'll do a little bit better. Beyond that, skipped the zombie shuffle. I really wanted to do that for Halloween. I'm a big fan of Halloween and really wanted to do this slow CW QRP event. Life got in the way. So I skipped that, unfortunately, but that's a great event. Anybody making plans for next year, definitely, if you know CW, you would enjoy the zombie shuffle. I did it for 2 years and it's pretty fantastic. That's it for me. No, there is one other thing. This is actually very important. I'm glad I remembered it. In another week, I am going to Robert Moses State Park, which is a big POTA park on the Atlantic ocean front. Very big deal. We're doing POTA, the Great South Bay Amateur Radio Club, my home radio club here in New York. It's going to be a memorial special event station using the club call sign W2GSB. And the club will be on the air using CW, sideband, and FT8 in memory of Walt Grosser, W2TE, who became a silent key at age 92 this summer. And this park was one of his favorite spots to come and test his antennas and to do DXing, two of his greatest passions in amateur radio. Actually, he had others. Marconi was one of them too. But among activities was experimenting with antennas and getting DX. So the club will honor him because he was not only a founder of the club, it's he was there at the very beginning. He also served as its second president. So I'm excited about that. I'm sorry Walt is gone. He was an awfully nice man. But this is a very fitting way to honor him, and I'm so happy that the club is doing this. So again, W2GSB at Robert Moses State Park. Come and get us. Back to you, Martin.
Well, that sounds good, Caryn, and I must admit I've been trying to get out operating more myself. In fact, pretty much for the last few Saturdays I've been out operating in the afternoon. So, albeit that's a good one. Dan, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Well, I'll follow on the in the POTA line of thought here. The weather's been incredibly warm here for end of October. And over the last week and a half, I've been able to make actually 3 POTA activations. And the bands have been like wonderful, like Caryn has mentioned. So I've made, in successive activations, I've made 80 contacts, 70 contacts, and again, 80 contacts just yesterday, or well, it was yesterday or Monday. Anyway, it's included some DX contacts and just contacts all over the U.S. And it's just been great, just been incredibly nice. And other activities, I bought an S-Bit X transceiver, and this is one of the ones being put out by Farhan in India, hfsignals.com. And when I got it, this is the radio that's powered or controlled, I guess you could say, by a Raspberry Pi. And when I got it, I was really kind of disappointed in it because the CW performance was really poor. I don't know what the software was doing exactly, but it wasn't doing that right. And so it was very hard to actually key the transmitter. But some folks here in the U.S. have, well, I say U.S., but I think it's actually an international group, has improved the software. So now that it's actually usable on CW, so that's been interesting, and you might want to check that out because it's an interesting little radio. It puts out 20 watts. It's an SDR radio. The Raspberry Pi does SDR, and you actually get a waterfall display, and all for $400. So it's kind of an interesting radio to take a look at. I also operated a special event station. October 24th was the date that the Rotary Club was founded in Chicago. And I forget the exact year, but it's been over 100 years. And that day has been designated as World Polio Day by the Rotary International. And it's the day we try to publicize our End Polio Now campaign. So some ham radio operators around the world take out special event stations and operate special events. And so I was operated as Whiskey 8 Papa, and I didn't make as many contacts as I hoped. But in emailing the other folks, especially this one guy in Australia, he mentioned that I should have been using FT8. Well, I'm not a big FT8 guy, but he said because of his FT8 activation, he made many more contacts than I did and got many more hits to his QRZ.com page, which obviously publicized our End Polio Now campaign. So I think maybe next year I'll operate FT8 just to get more publicity, which is the point of the special event station. And finally, just to show that it's not all ham radio all the time with me, I rejoined our bowling team. and I've been doing a lot better than I even expected, because it's been a couple of years since I bowled. But this Monday night, I had a 600 series, which series is a series of 3 games, meaning I averaged over 200 per game, and that's pretty good, especially for not having bowled for a couple of years. So that's the news from KB6NU.
Yeah, that's good news, Dan. Good news. And I won't mention my bowling expertise or lack of, because I'll probably get into trouble with what I would have said. But it sounds like you've been having fun. Ed, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, I probably sound like a bit of a cracked record to many of the listeners, but again, it's been antennas and portable operating, and I've been doing some work optimizing the wire beam, the HF wire beam that I use portable now, and with a lot of help from another local amateur, that's Rob DM1CM. He's actually got a website I've mentioned before, but anyway, I'll mention it again, portable-antennas.com. And on there, he's got models for quite a few different types of wire antennas that you might use portable. And you can play around with various parameters, your height off ground, the angles of the apex, and the end result of that is... I tried to expand my beam from covering 10, 12, 15, 17 and 20 to 40 meters as well. And my practical tests on that, they didn't work. It didn't work very well on 40 meters. And when I came back and put it into this modeling software, online modeling software, I could see why. So it was actually radiating in every possible direction. So with the height of mast that I use portable, it isn't ever going to be a 40-meter beam. However, I've managed to optimize that for 10 meters and 10 meters to 20 meters. And specifically, the Saturday before this podcast is released, so the 2nd of November, is the annual SOTA Summit to Summit, North America to Europe Activity Day, which effectively means the afternoon in Europe and the morning in the certainly East Coast US. And the aim there is to get as many contacts from summits to summits, both within your own continent and across continents. And with the radio conditions the way they are at the moment, it looks very promising indeed certainly for 10 meters. And we mentioned Brazil in the last item. There's also a couple of SOTA activators heading to some very tall, very high mountains in Brazil to take part as well. So we're hoping for a lot of contacts down that way with the wire beam, giving me a bit of gain on the lower power that I run when I'm portable. and we'll see how it goes and maybe report back on it in a month's time when we're next on. But I've got high hopes, but we'll see what comes. Apart from that, just general operating, general bits and pieces, but really the antennas, as I said, a bit like a broken record, a scratched record. Antennas for portable operation is something I've been doing for the last several years, and it's important to get it done now before the snows arrive here, which I guess we'll probably see the first snow in about a month's time or 6 weeks' time, and so on. All my antenna gear are all ready and finished for when I'm going out in that kind of weather. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you've been busy, mate. Sounds like you've been busy. So I've left you to last, Edmund, because there was a time I mentioned on the last one, but not. I was out with yourself about a couple of weeks ago. But what have you been up to?
Not a lot, really. The main thing that springs to mind is that I have a hotspot that I don't run 24 hours a day. In fact, I can go for several weeks between plugging it in and switching it on, because I don't pop up on the talk group very often. And a few weeks ago, we had a new router delivered here by BT, British Telecom, and they also replaced a bit of wire outside the property, I think it was. So hopefully my internet connection is now even more reliable than it was previously. But anyway, I went to turn the hotspot on a couple of weeks back, and a message came up on the LCD screen that said it was initializing, which is what always happens when I turn it on, but then it got stuck there. It wouldn't progress any further. Now, it was obviously fresh in my mind that the router had been replaced not long before, and if a message had come up on the screen that said Wi-Fi not found or similar, then I would have immediately put two and two together. But because it just said initializing and then got stuck there, didn't go any further, my first thought was the device had failed altogether and maybe I was going to have to buy myself a new hotspot. But the router with its new password and new ID, whatever the proper word for it is, was the problem. And if you go to the Pi-Star website and follow the instructions, it tells you how to... There's a screen where you can put in the new router name and the password, and that will then create a file. And if you then put that file in the relevant folder for your hotspot, it should then work. I probably haven't explained that using all the right words because I'm not massively computer literate, but if I manage to get it going, I would think there's hope out there for most people. And it's worked perfectly ever since. So the reason I mention all of this is simply because if you change your router or change your internet service provider also, I guess, then that will cause problems. But when you turn your hotspot on, you won't get a message that says it's having a problem connecting to the router. It'll just try to start up and it'll say initializing and then get stuck there. So all hope is not lost. And I put a message in the ICQ podcast Facebook group, and that was where the answer kindly came from one of our listeners. So I thought that was a great example of radio amateurs helping other radio amateurs. Back to you, Martin.
Well, yeah, I know that you did that. I didn't get you quick enough to help you. I'm sorry. But about 3 weeks ago or so, you and I were out doing 433 Alive. I mentioned it. I know you had a great smile on your face when you finished, and your good lady was pleased for both of us that we got the number of contacts we had on 77. So I think that was good, Edmund.
Yeah, absolutely. And 70 centimetres is a nice band because you can get useful amounts of gain with relatively small antennas. Okay, you've got a greater path loss over any given path. Only slight trouble is if you want to take part in 433 Alive, is choose your location carefully, because there's a lot of license-free devices in the ISM, Industrial Science Medical Band, centred around 433.92. So where we were, up on Epsom Downs, we were kind of out in the sticks a little bit. There weren't many buildings or transmitters close to us, but even so, on certain simplex frequencies, we're getting breakthrough from, well, all kinds of things. I don't know, weather stations, car tyre pressure monitors, all that kind of thing, weren't we, Martin?
Yeah, I think it was fair to say there was a horrible amount of noise up there, but we had good fun anyway. That was a good one, wasn't it? So, yeah. Right, what have I been up to? Well, I'd say for the last 3 Saturdays, first one was with Edmund, but the last 3 Saturdays, I've been out doing a bit of operating, middle of the afternoon, just go out, have a bit of a play. I'm loving my Zygo G90 for HF, but I don't only do HF, I do other things as well. I had an interesting conversation. I took my Zygo to the club the other week, and before people started turning up, I hooked it up to the club antenna, and I was operating. And people in the UK were coming back to me. And now, it wasn't line of sight, because it would have been even the power the guy was running. But I'm 15 miles south of London at the club. And a guy in Darlington came back to me, and he gave me a 5 and 9, and he was a 5 and 9. And he said, I'm running 500 watts. Okay. He said, you can't be running 20. Yes, I am. I then worked another guy in Bury St Edmunds, not quite as far north, but far enough, running 200 watts. Gives me a 5 and 9, and I tell him I'm running 20 watts. He said, well, you're only running a tenth of the power I'm running, but we're both brilliant signals. I worked a guy down in Cardiff as well, similar sort of thing. What I think they don't realise is, at 40 metres, we were on 40 metres. Of a night time, their antennas probably weren't up high enough. So they were probably running MBIS. And if you're running MBIS, your signal goes up and it just comes down like a big cone, covers a massive area. So, you can sit there running 500 watts or 200 watts or whatever. But equally, you can do like I do and run a lot less power. I think the thing was maxed out on 20 watts, but you can get 20 watts. You can work loads of people locally to yourself and across Europe as well. So, just a quick thought on that one. I did do one of my Saturday operations. I did on 4 meters. That was a bit slow, but a bit of fun. Have been on the talk group a few times recently. Progressing with the training I'm doing for one of my students. That is moving forward, so that's a good one. And I got given a Bluetooth adapter, and unfortunately, the thing wrong with it was that the little battery inside, the little flat pack battery, the lithium-ion battery had died. And I looked up on the Japanese websites, and they were all saying 2 to 3 months to get the battery I wanted. I ended up buying it off Amazon. It was a bit more expensive, but I got it the next day. So it took me longer to work out how to get this thing apart, break the glue seals along the side without damaging the unit, and fit a new battery. And I've got this little Bluetooth device you can plug into something with a 3.5mm jack, and away you go. So that's fixing things, and been doing some documentation about the house, trying to get things tidy, sorting out paperwork that I've had for years. So that's really what I've been up to. Right, so pretty much that's it. We've all been busy. So all that's left for me to do is thank the guys for turning up. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, you're very welcome, Martin.
Yeah, good to chat to you as always, Dan. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
And thank you, Martin. It's been a really good chat. We turned the clocks this weekend, and we should be back in sync with you guys next time we meet.
Yeah, I did warn you a little bit that we were all screwed up. That's why we operate UTC. But yes, it does get us every now and again. In the UK, I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, mate. We'll catch up with you fairly soon. And over there in Germany, Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Yep, thanks, Martin. And luckily, the UK and Europe still changed the clocks at the same time, so the local time for me is still the same as it used to be. And as Karen says, once they change, it'll be back to normal there as well. But that's another talent that radio amateurs have, is calculating what time it is at the other side of the world to see if you can get some good DX contacts.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I'll say 73 to you guys, and we'll move on to the next part of the podcast. 73, guys.
Yep, 73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BLY. We start off with news that RSGB President John McCulloch, Golf India 4 Bravo Whiskey Mike, has been awarded the Brian Tyndall Shield, and this shield was awarded to him for his contribution not only to amateur radio but his outstanding contribution to providing emergency radio coverage during his voluntary service with RAYNET in Northern Ireland. So congratulations, John, on that wonderful prestigious award. Congratulations continue to ARRL members, and they raised a sum of $47,000 that will be put towards STEM education in the annual online auction. 206 items were put up for sale, which attracted 1,430 bids, so collecting a total of $47,000, which is going to be put towards activities including promoting activities to license new hams, strengthening emergency service training, offering technical and operational education, and creating instruction materials for our educators. So congratulations to all involved, and those of you who won your auctions, I really hope you enjoy your wonderful prizes. The team at HAMSCI, led by Associate Professor of Physics and Engineering Nathaniel Frizzle, Whiskey 2 November Alpha Foxtrot, have been awarded a grant of $1.8 million by the National Science Foundation to further their efforts with the project. So what they're going to be basically doing is along with their usual activities, they're looking at developing a network of 30 standardized receiving stations capable of observing high-frequency Doppler shifts, HF amateur radio weak signal propagation reporters, or known as WHISPER, transmissions, very low frequency transmissions, and natural radio emissions, and of course the geomagnetic field. So as I say, they continue their work, this group, the HAMSCI group, and say that funding will be very well received. Right, now we're going to move over to our features episode, and this episode's feature is Weekend Projects. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi guys, for this episode I wanted to talk about weekend projects. Now, don't think I'm talking down to you or getting at you, because I'm equally as bad at doing these as most people are. But as we move into the winter series up in here in the Northern Hemisphere, there are certain things that we probably ought to be doing. Now guys, some of these things are still pretty valid down in the Southern Hemisphere anyway. If not now, they will be in about 6 months' time. So, what would I have been up to and what should I do? Well, if you're like me, over the years you've bought a number of mobile whips to go on top of your car to operate different frequency bands. And some of mine are HF, some are VHF, some are UHF, some are both. Some are multi-band antennas. So, kind of, after a while you end up with quite a pile of antennas and you can't remember which one is which. And they're not always obvious when you just look at them. So, one of the suggestions here is, and I've started doing it because it's frustrating me no end, is to start labelling these antennas. Labelling them so I know what band of frequencies they work on. So when I go out to play, I just go and pick the right one up. So often I pick up half a dozen and hope I get the right one, and then have to work out when I get to site. So if you've got an antenna analyzer, that makes life easier. Just put a mag mount on top of the car, play with the antenna analyzer until you find what frequency the particular radio antenna is, and then just label it up. And it's certainly working for me now. Something I should have done years ago, but I'm getting around to it. Hi. Okay, second little thing that I think needs doing every now and again, and I'm about to do it on some of my pieces of equipment, is a lot of equipment has cooling fans. Power supplies, our computers, radios, all those sort of things have cooling fans. And over a period of time, they suck in dust and dirt and muck, and they tend to clog up with dust and dirt and that sort of thing. So, there's a number of ways of cleaning them. You can open them up and clean the blades manually. Takes quite an effort. They do sell cans of compressed air, which you can squirt devices to blow the muck and the dust off, and they work quite well. One disadvantage is, though, that because they're an aerosol, the can starts to get very cold in your hand very, very quickly. So just be aware of that. The other thing I've got is a high power blower. It looks like a jug with a spout on it, and it blows high pressure air. I use it for cleaning computers out and all sorts of things. Very, very handy. However, I would suggest if you're cleaning fans or round fans, I would put your finger on the fan to stop it spinning, because the high pressure air hoses and air devices like the one I've got can make your fan run extremely fast, probably faster than it ought to run. And you don't want to end up damaging the bearings. The object is not to damage the fan. The object is to give it a good clean so it works more efficiently next time you use the piece of equipment. So there's just a little silly cooling fans. Yeah, good idea to have them cleaned out, and it doesn't hurt to give equipment a blowout inside. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, though, make sure you feel comfortable doing this. Right, move to our next suggestion, and that is quick disconnect and connect connectors. Now, when I set up the shack, originally I decided I wasn't going to take my main radios out of the shack and go portable. Then later on I thought, hang on a minute, you're wasting your time here, Martin. Sometimes you do want to take a more high power rig out with you. You do want to be able to use it, and why limit yourself to only be able to use it when you're at home? So what I've done is I've taken the lead that came with my ICOM 7300, my ICOM 7300, and my ICOM 9700, and I've cut the power lead in half, and I've fitted power pole connectors so that if I want to take the radio out, I just pull it forward, undo the power pole connector, and in my instance I've got BNC connectors onto my antennas, so I just pull it forward, undo the power pole connector, undo the BNC connectors onto the aerial, and the radio just pulls straight out. I can then use it when I get back to the shack. It's only a 2-second job to plug it all back in again. So that's a thought. I'm not suggesting you do it. It may be very, very useful. if you think you might find that useful, get some power pole connectors and away you go. Now we always suggest in the winter time, you probably need to give your antennas a good checking. The ones outside, make sure everything's tight, the bolts and everything on the adapters are tight. Make sure that your self-amalgamating tape hasn't got any splits in it. And just make sure the antenna's in good condition, because we're going into the winter period and we don't want to be trying to climb up on roofs when it's a foot of snow up there or whatever it's like to be in the horrible weather. So that's one probably worth doing fairly early on. But once again, it doesn't take too long. These are all little jobs that can be done on a weekend when you've got a few minutes time. Now, another one that we all forget, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody else. Some point in time, we all ought to do this, is check the batteries in our test equipment. So, for argument's sake, how many times have you gone to a piece of test equipment, the battery's died, and it's leaked inside? If you're lucky, you can clean out all the leakage and one thing or another and resurrect the device. If you're really unlucky, the battery that leaked may have eaten away half of the battery connector, and then you have to do a lot more work to get that device to work again. So, in fairness, checking batteries, and guys, remember, don't check a battery on a digital voltmeter. It will tell you it's 9 volt. If it's a 9 volt battery, it will tell you it's 9 volts because you don't draw any current. You need to either have a battery tester that puts a load on a device to see if it's any good or not, or you need to do it with an analog meter. Now, one thing I don't do, but probably ought to going forward, is put a label on the battery, the date it was fitted. Yeah, because you don't know when you fitted that battery in your device. Might be an idea, and I'm thinking of doing this going forward myself. Okay, I would suggest also now's the time to make sure that your portable batteries, the ones you take out and operate your rig portable in the field with, the big LiPo batteries and things like that, or lead acid batteries, you should have them now fully charged as we go into winter. You might have power cuts. It might be important that you are able to operate on the radio. If that battery's flat, there's no point in spending a hell of a lot of money on a battery and it's sitting in your garage or under your stairs and flat. They need to be kept charged, and it's worth just checking them every now and again to make sure that everything's okay. And if you do have a power problem in the house for a few days or whatever, at least you've got a way of contacting people. So it is well worth doing this. And also, on that sort of thing, if we do get power cuts, and they happen not only in the winter, but if you do get power cuts, it's worth knowing where to find your torch. Torches and portable lights. I mean, I have a couple of little portable LED lights that are actually worth a godsend when you have a power cut. It's surprising how well they work. But they work other things when you're doing jobs outside and it's dark, or you're doing jobs around the house where you've turned the power off to fix the problem. They're also good for that. But be sure that you know where they are in the winter so that you're able to have a better life if you have a power cut. So, a few little tips. Hopefully I haven't bored you with them. It's just the thoughts from what I'm up to, and I thought I'll pass them on just in case. And as I say, make sure if you do open up pieces of equipment and do cooling fans, don't hit them too hard with a high power jet of air. I usually put, say, a finger on the fan blade to stop it spinning, and it blows the dust off and cleans it all out, and then go from there. I hope this was of use.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, as the winter nights draw in Northern Hemisphere, and or as your evenings draw brighter in the Southern Hemisphere, I really hope you enjoy our feature there on weekend projects, and we'll certainly give you more things to do and enjoy our wonderful hobby. So thanks, Dad, for doing that there, and I'm sure, as always, it will generate feedback of people that, as I say, will find a little gem in there, as they always do with those sort of features. So no, thanks a lot for doing that for everyone, Dad.
Yeah, no problems. As I say, it was an interesting few ideas, some of which are a bit obvious, others, well, worth a thought, but it's just something to be working on when you can't play radio some of the time, but improve it for later.
Yeah, true. And then sometimes, well, you forget about some of the little gems along the way, so it's always good to have a reminder as well. So, yeah, thanks for that for us. Right, well, as I say, we always welcome everybody's feedback to the ICQ podcast, and it comes in various forms. And one of the ways you can do that is to comment upon some of the news stories that are published on the ICQ podcast webpage. You can do it there. And Judy Brown commented in relation to a news story we had recently in relation to Canadian teen gains license after ham radio coursework, and she tells us that the student Nathan Brown from Wentangla Park, I think it's pronounced, was on City TV News on October the 17th, educating the general public on the mainstream news on that episode. So thanks, Julie, for letting us know, and congratulations to Nathan, as I say, for not only your success, but also for helping us promote our wonderful hobby. So thanks a lot there for that. Right, well, as I say, thanks as well go to our monthly and annual subscription donors. We really do appreciate you helping us out with our running costs and support, and helping us grow our show, and most importantly, for showing the value that you find in your ICQ podcast. We'd obviously ask you, if you found any value from your show that you've listened to today, for you to go along to icqpodcast.com/donate and select a amount, either a one-off or a subscription model that shows your value in the show, and we would really appreciate you doing that for us. So thanks a lot for considering us today. Of course, we'd like to thank Dan, KB6 Uniform, Caryn, KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa for taking part in the news roundtable with your dad. So great to have the guys there with you there. Right, well, it's probably coming up to that important part of our show now, where we have to thank some of the most important people in our lives, and in your case, it's time for a cup of tea for Mrs. B, and hopefully a fine treat as well.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do for Mrs. B this morning. And Mrs. B's up and about, so we'll find something nice in a minute, Colin.
I think we might have even just heard there in the background, so we better let you go and look after there. So I'm going to say 73s to everybody, and as I say, I hope you enjoy our wonderful hobby in the next fortnight as we catch up again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
Yeah, 73.